Today, the story of a country where it seems that the 77-year-old president is completely absent from the campaign trail, but a shoo-in to win a fourth term next week. Algeria's Abedelaziz Bouteflika, who spent most of last year in hospital here in France, one of the last of the generation that fought his country's war of independence from France. There had been wavering over his candidacy, but after some score settling among the military and the ruling FLN party, the choice was the status quo. Those who want change are numerous in an oil and gas-rich nation that's boxing well below its weight category in human development indicators. Algerians, often wary of politics, though, they're haunted by the ferocious civil war that followed the 1992 cancellation of elections that Islamists were set to win. As we're about to see, in a nation where 70% of the population is under the age of 30, there is a change, though. Algerians are finding new ways of getting their point across outside of the established political parties. Coming up, we're going to see a special report on the North African nation's burgeoning civil society. What impact will it have? Today, in the France 24 debate, we're looking at the case of Algeria. And with us from Algiers, Farouk ATIG. He's the editor-in-chief of production company Intégrale Production. Many thanks for being with us. We want to thank as well Sophia Ait Kassi. She's a freelance reporter. Thank you for being with us here in the studio. He was based in Algiers as an American diplomat, the former director of the U.S. State Department's North Africa desk, William Jordan. Thank you for joining us. And from London, where he works in finance, Kamel BENKOUSSA, who was candidate for next week's election but dropped out of the race. We'll ask you about that a little bit later on. Thank you for joining us. The France 24 debate, where you can join the conversation on Facebook and on Twitter, our hashtag F24debate. After a few protests at the outset, they said back in 2010 that the Arab Spring had passed Algeria by. But parallel to the election campaign we're currently witnessing, there's been a distinct whiff of grassroots activism of a new sort. Our story was filmed for Reporters, the France 24 investigative news magazine.
Protest day in Algiers. It's the second demonstration in just a week. Protesters trickle onto the streets under the watchful eye of the riot police. Supporters of the Barakat movement, which means enough in Arabic, are defying an official ban on mass protests. They want President Bouteflika to hand over power, but as they shout no to a fourth term, they are arrested.
People are fed up. We've had enough of this government. He's not satisfied with 15 years in power. He wants to remain president for eternity. Barakat, that's enough.
The police vans are packed. Caught up in the arrests, Louisa, one of the founders of Barakat. Despite fighting off 4 police officers, she's taken away and then freed a few hours later without facing charges. Over the last month, the Barakat movement has grown in strength. In this report, we find out more about the opinions of these opponents. In a bid to avoid police surveillance, activists never protest at the same time or at the same place. Barakat's membership is mostly middle class and educated. Louisa's recent arrest made the front page of many newspapers. She has become a symbol of resistance.
That photo went viral across the world. What happened? Policewomen tried to stop you?
They gagged us. They wanted to silence us. Frankly, if this photo puts our movement in the limelight, then so be it.
Barakat's first major protest captured public attention, but it has yet to broaden its appeal beyond the middle class. While some are fatalistic about the election result, others are afraid of a government change. Amira is another protest leader. She believes young Algerians have a major role to play in the struggle ahead.
Why can't my son have any dreams? One day he might want to obtain a visa to start a new life in France, or he might want to watch a great football game. He needs to have dreams to build his country.
Barakat members insist Algeria is ready for change. They reject the re-election of the 77-year-old president for another 5 years. This writer takes heart from the struggle for the independence of Algeria from France in the 50s and early 60s.
It always starts with a dream, and some people, sometimes only a handful of people, change the course of history. Resistance has always existed in our country. Outsiders colonized Algeria and faced a wave of rebellion that ousted them in the end. That occurred pretty recently.
For the moment, authorities seem to tolerate the Barakat movement. There have been no mass arrests over the past couple of weeks, but they accuse the protesters of trying to destabilize the country.
They're trying to spread fear. They paint a threatening picture of us, saying we could become like our neighbors, like Libya or Tunisia.
Barakat says its policies have nothing to do with neighbouring countries and that it doesn't want a revolution at home. Mustafa Ben Fodil is a journalist. He says Algeria needs a revamp.
Perhaps people don't understand what we're doing. Some believe our movement represents the Arab Spring and that we don't love our nation. People are confused, but our message is clear. The Barakat movement is something that unites people to draw up a consensual project for the entire society.
The election is on the 17th of April, not much time for Barakat to make its presence felt. In the capital, Algiers, posters of Bouteflika are everywhere, and for many voters, he is the face of the nation. Sadiq Shihab, who's a parliamentary deputy close to the ruling government, says a sudden political transition would be bad for the country.
We're trying to satisfy the youth's aspirations, but we're also trying to learn from our previous mistakes. We want to avoid brutal political changes like the ones we saw in the 90s. It wouldn't be good for us. We want to build a true democracy.
In '92, the government cancelled parliamentary elections after an Islamist party won, triggering a civil war. Shihab wants to avoid the errors of the past.
Authorities don't want to repress people. Their aim is to control these movements so that we don't spark public disorder. Past experiences have shown that such movements are not spontaneous. Nothing's spontaneous in politics. There's always a motive and a goal to reach.
For some young voters, there's no need to take to the streets to denounce the regime. An alternative online protest is creeping up on social networks, defying government censorship. Web users like Ali say satirical videos are much more powerful than any editorial. Here, a sketch mocks the Prime Minister's poor speaking skills. It hit hundreds of thousands of views on the internet.
كم يكون عمر هذا الشاب يعني ب 18 20 سنة يعني شيء يعني
How old is he again? 18, 20? The younger generation is more involved in politics, clearly expressing its needs.
يعني وعي الشاب هذا واضح. أولاً الشباب هذا يتبع ويفهم.
Youngsters are into politics and they understand it. Bloggers comment on certain issues and even send messages to political leaders saying, we know what's going on and here's our opinion.
To get their message across, bloggers use street slang and a lot of humour. They are the rising stars of the web.
مشاكل ما يخلصوش خونا وش بيه؟
ما تقلقوش راني جبت لكم الحل. وش من الحل؟
وش كاين؟ خير ان شاء الله.
ترجعني لخدمتي انا، ترجعني لمرتي انا.
زوجني، تقدر تزوجني. زوجني.
خليني نخدم انايا. لا وشنو هو الحل مالا؟ الحل انتخابات 17 افريل. شنو؟ انتخابات 17 افريل.
نشوف هاد 5 دقائق يعني يعبر لي على كل شيء.
Within 5 minutes, you pinpoint exactly what's going on. No need for long, laborious speeches that make no sense. If I were a political leader, I wouldn't read newspapers. I go straight to the internet and watch these videos on YouTube and on Facebook. It's easy, spontaneous and sincere. No need to ponder. I've got a problem and I want a solution.
Bouteflika's main rival, Ali Ben Fliss, hopes to win the support of the young. His right-hand man is Abedelaziz Rahabi. He's a former minister turned opponent of the regime who regards the Algerian elite as hidebound and outdated.
The regime reproduces its own elite, but there's no innovation. The discourse hasn't changed in 50 years. In 2014, they're convinced that an invisible president can still rule the country. These new generations who are constantly on the web have a free and independent political culture. They are more inspired by the West than they are by the Arab world.
Bab el-Oued, the heart of the working class. Here, everything is linked to politics. A game of dominoes can quickly spill over into political debate.
The game is over.
Most Algerians believe the presidential race is a foregone conclusion. Quickly enough, the conversation turns to the state of Bouteflika's health. The domino players are divided.
There won't be a fourth term. The third term was one too many. We don't want anything bad to happen to him. May God protect his health. But he needs to hand over power to someone with fresh ideas for Algeria.
Bouteflika is far better than a total stranger. He knows our history, and we know what he's achieved. He's done a lot for our country.
The president's health is a national preoccupation, rivaling people's worries about their daily problems. Faris is 24. He comes from Dulel in eastern Algeria, and he's found a job in Algiers, but has grown increasingly wary of politicians from across the spectrum.
They keep to themselves. They do what they want, not what we want. They only make promises about boosting employment and housing to get elected. But in reality, I expect nothing from them. Nothing from Bouteflika or from anybody else.
Faris and his friends have decided not to cast their ballots. They believe the election is pointless. The government has used Algeria's oil revenues to ease economic tensions, but unemployment and homelessness are soaring, key issues that have so far been ignored in a campaign which puts Bouteflika himself in the limelight.
And that story was shot by Karim Hakiki and Adel Gastel for Reporters de France 24 investigative news magazine. Let's begin with you, Farouk ATIG in Algiers. Farouk, you see that report and you see that people are interested in politics, a bit disaffected, though, with what's on offer. And you also see something which was interesting, which was both the people in that Barakat movement and the representative from parliament for the ruling FLN, they use the word consensus, how there has to be a consensual project. You have to avoid brutal change. Algerians seem fearful of change.
Yes, because we have to remember that in the 90s, there was this very harsh period of violences after the election of 1988. And all the Algerians, the pro-Bouteflika and the others, the opposition, are all clear that there is a need to stabilize the situation in terms of securitization and security. So, of course, the regime is actually playing with that fear, saying that if we need stability, we need Bouteflika. But actually, there must be a change.
Kamel BENKOUSSA, I know you're a supporter of the Barakat movement. What do you think when you see in the report how they mention that for now, this sort of movement well, it's really limited to the middle-class elites.
Thank you for having me. It's a very interesting time in Algeria right now because of this election, but I do believe what Barakat is doing right now, I think is very important. Even if it's limited to a few people in Algeria, I think their voices has been heard by a lot of people across the country. You can hear a lot of Barakat coming out, not only in Algiers, but in the east side of Algeria, on the west, on the south. And it's very healthy to have a civil voice to raise itself up in such a difficult time for such a big country, the biggest country in Africa.
Sophia Haxie, what struck you when you saw that report?
Well, I have to say first that even if most of the people in Algeria are indeed very afraid of going back to a civil war, you also have to consider that, for example, in 2013, there was like 6,000, more than 6,000 protests in the country. So it's not really accurate to say that people are keeping calm and are very quiet. There are some protests. Barakat is a new movement, and what I see different in this movement is the fact that they don't protest for one specific particular objective. For example, you have the movement for youth unemployment. You have people protesting because there is a shortage of water, and so on. For the last years, you had many movements like that. But Barakat, I see something different. They're trying to gathering all this energy, and at the same time, they have political message, which is not only they want they don't really stress on the fact that Bouteflika has to leave, because Bouteflika is only one person in the system. They stress on the fact that they want almost like a new constitution and so on.
Bouteflika, one person in the system, that's a point we're going to pick up on when we come back. Just a comment coming in from one viewer here. La Yasmin says, if stability means Bouteflika, then Bouteflika is what we want. We'll react to that with our panel when we come back. You're watching the France 24 debate.